want to tell a story about my own experience with playback theatre. I think being with 300 people of 30 different countries, having so much fun and be able to feel whatever it is you are feeling and sharing it, and I don't know that from anywhere. And I know you love playback theatre, all of you. And the reason we chose for this topic is that in '99 I was in York, and it was for me the first time I was in a gathering like this, and I was so touched so deeply that we spent a lot of energy and time in our own playback group, and we had performances, and it was very touching, and I was very happy with it. But I realized after a while that the only people that got to see our performances were people with jobs, working in an organization where they already had a salary and a nice life. And all the people in Holland who didn't have a job and were not able to buy a ticket for a theater, they were never seeing us, never experiencing playback theater. And then I started to work with refugee women in an asylum seeker center. And it was wonderful what happened with the women, and we shared wonderful deep stories, and we had wonderful touching moments, but nothing changed. They were sent away to their country anyway, or they stayed living in this awful place. So I felt frustrated, and I started a group in my own community with migrant women because I thought it is more sustainable. And it is 3 years now that we work together, and it is wonderful, and they are empowered, and we share a lot of deep stories, and we work on deep issues. But they are still very poor. Nothing changed in their situation. So still I sometimes feel frustrated. And I do playback theatre. I learned from Sikko that it's an artistic answer to a social problem. And I went to Plymouth, and I learned a lot from Jonathan about to build relationships with other institutions to do more than just the playback, but to work together with other. But still, I think there is very much to learn there. And like in Holland, we have Sinterklaas. Many of you saw Sinterklaas this afternoon, and it's a very old tradition, but he brings his black beads, and many colored people living in Holland feel discriminated, and there is a lot of hidden racism, and it is a big issue, and there is still so much I would love to use playback for, to change things in the society. And I am sure that when we share about this kind of work we do, that we can learn very much from each other and make playback a more effective tool. So that's what I hope for these days. That's what I wanted to say. And now I give the...
Hi everyone. So we planned to bring everybody into a dialogue about these topics, about how playback theatre can be a force for change and can be a way to address issues of justice and injustice. And we decided to begin with 3 of us saying something. So Vendela went first, and we just heard her story. I'm going to read something reflecting some of my experience, and then Jonathan has a statement too. And then we're going to ask you to reflect with each other. So we'll lead you through that step by step, and then finally we are going to do a little short playback performance with volunteer actors from the home group leaders, where we can see some of these thoughts and feelings and experiences in action. So, what I wrote, the title of it is "The Political is Personal." There's a very well-known slogan in the United States that first came out of the women's movement in the 70s, in fact coined by a friend of mine called Carol Hainish. The personal is political. Has anyone heard that slogan? Yeah. The personal is political. It became something we hear all the time now. It means that what happens in your personal life also has significance on a larger scale of power, privilege, and politics. When an individual struggles with poverty or discrimination or violence, that personal struggle is in reality part of a much larger societal struggle, and it can be tremendously empowering to realize this much larger dimension. It's not just your story, you are part of something much larger. For a number of years, in my playback work, I've been very interested in expanding our focus on personal stories to include awareness of the wider world, both by opening our ears to the societal and historical and political echoes that are present in so many stories, and by encouraging audience members to think about stories that may not have happened in your own personal life, but are important to you because you've heard about them and you've been deeply impacted by those stories. It could be something that happened the other side of the world, but that event becomes part of your story if you care deeply about it. Such stories can be a very rich part of our playback canvas. So thinking about the personal, emotional impact of stories from the wider world, which often are stories that relate to injustice and political transformation, it struck me recently that we could reverse Carol's slogan and say the political is personal. What happens in the realm of power actually does impact and influence our personal lives, either through, sometimes through changes in the laws, economic changes, the global climate, sometimes simply because we are aware and we are moved and we remember. So the theme of this conference is playback theatre and active citizenship. We just saw some absolutely wonderful active citizenship right here in this space. Very, very moving and exciting for me to witness that. And I hope we'll all be exploring this question over the next few days and in the years to come. To me, active citizenship means being both informed and willing to take action. This is how I've lived my life since I was a young teenager, when I marched against nuclear weapons and then the Vietnam War, and I've never stopped marching. It's morally important to me to take a stand, even when my point of view might not be shared by the majority of the population or even by my family and friends. But as a playback performer and teacher, I'm also aware that being open about my convictions, my beliefs, can sometimes clash with the need to create space for anyone's story. If a playback team is explicit about their point of view on a political or social issue, will we silence people in the audience who see things differently? My company has done a number of shows on the topic of climate change. For example, after one of these shows, we were challenged by a regular audience member who said he chose not to come to the show because he doubted that we would be open to a story from someone like him who believed that climate change was a false threat. He was a climate change denier. I think if he had come and told his story, we would have played it back respectfully, but he was right in believing that his point of view would probably not have been shared by anyone else in the room. The title of the show, Stories from Our Changing World, from Our Changing Climate, showed that we believed climate change was a reality. Were we wrong to present a show on this theme without being neutral? If we had called it climate change, fact or fiction, maybe this man would have come. And I have failed to print out the last page of my... So I have to improvise. So it leaves me with these questions. Can we be open to any story and true to our convictions at the same time? And what does it mean to use playback to address issues of injustice, including injustice on a major and structural level? Can we do this? Is our form strong and flexible and resilient enough? And those are the questions that I want to end with.
Good evening, everyone. May I speak to you in English? Like Joe, I have some prepared words, but first I want to say thank you all for coming. And even more important, thank you for making playback theater an important part of your life. So my talk is called Playback Theater and the Citizen Actor. For many years, the Center for Playback Theater courses took place at Vassar College in New York State, an old and elegant private university. I remember speaking with Sister Claire Therese, one of the first Indians from India, to come there for training. Sister Claire has a background in street theater. Soon after her arrival, she took me aside specifically to ask me what was for her an urgent question. Is it true, Jonathan, that you allow playback theater to take place in private corporations? She asked me. I nodded. I explained that although it was not all under my control, I did not take a stand on that. Shame on you, she cried. Another story from Vassar. We are in the early part of a student performance. I am the conductor. The performance was being held outdoors on one of Vassar's sculpted lawns. Invited were members of the Vassar College community. Included in the mix of people sitting on the grass, I noticed a group of high school students with their teacher. I did not know for sure, but I guessed they were from a special summer program for bright kids from poor economic backgrounds who were preparing to be the first in their families to go to university. I wanted to hear what these kids had to say. But when I asked them what it was like to be at Vassar, instead of one of the kids answering, the teacher spoke for them. When I asked again, making it clear I wanted to hear from one of the young people, they glanced at their teacher and were silent. Finally, when I asked a third time, one of them spoke up. What does it take for people to speak up, to be allowed to speak up? I believe that everyone has a story and deserves to tell it, including the manager of a large corporation, including even that summer program teacher. It's one of the core values of playback theater. In that regard, I do not agree with Sister Claire, who would not bring playback into corporate halls. I have also learned, however, both through life experience and a lifetime of reading, that those in power often contrive to disseminate an official story that does not agree with ordinary people. Since our start 40 years ago, I have always been interested in hearing the stories of the silent ones and bringing them into the public forum. We can think of it as an effort in balancing the official story with the people's story. At times, that means enacting the stories of children. At times, women, especially young mothers. At times, refugees. At times, those in prison. At times, those living with an illness or disability of some kind. Over the years, we have learned that goodwill alone is not enough. How can we invite a person's story if they are not in the audience? We can look around this room and think of our playback community and reflect for a moment on who is not here and therefore without a chance for their story to be heard by the rest of us, either because they could not afford to come, Vendela spoke about this, or could not physically manage the journey, or have not been invited into playback in the first place. Or how can we expect them to speak up if they are the only one of their kind and stand out like an exotic flower? But even if we are sensitive to these issues of isolation and inclusion, what can we do about it? Let me tell you about a project that is taking place right now in Montreal, Canada, organized by a playback group called Promito. The project is called Crossing the Main, the ocean. It's an old word for ocean. Traverser la main. It has a theme very serious in that part of the world, speaking French or English. Canada, as you know, has 2 official languages, but depending on where you are, one of them usually predominates, and the issue is full of conflict. Promito, which has French and English native speakers among its membership, a first and very important consideration, planned 3 performances. First is for English speakers, and the purpose will be to share stories of being an English speaker in French Canada. The second performance is for French speakers, about being francophone in a country dominated by English-speaking culture. The third performance will bring the 2 audiences together for an open evening of dialogue through stories. Without this kind of effort and organization, it is unlikely that Promito performers would have the audience mix they wanted. In fact, how often have we offered a juicy theme for a performance and been disappointed by the meager turnout? The last performance of theirs is not until the 5th of February, but I hope it will be exciting and deep, providing the chance for a unique kind of exchange. By the way, you can contribute to their Indiegogo campaign to raise money for Crossing the Main, Traverser la main. Just look up Indiegogo and search for Crossing the Main by Promito Playback. The members of Promito are fulfilling the concept of the citizen actor that I wrote about in Acts of Service. Our involvement in playback theater puts an unusual set of skills at our disposal. Let's use them for the good of our communities.